Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I would like to welcome you on behalf of Prague Pride Association on today's debate on coming out and politics. For me, it's a very emotional moment, I have to say, because when we decided that we will do this debate, we didn't dream that we will have such a distinguished panel of debaters. So thank you very much for coming. When we decided last year that the topic of the Prague Pride will be coming out, we knew from the beginning that we want to approach it through different perspectives. And politics was one of the first perspectives that we decided that we would like to approach it. And then we started to think how to do it. And we started to think, okay, let's invite some Czech politicians. But let's be honest, how many openly gay politicians do we have in Czech Republic? Well, 0. And so we thought, okay, let's think big. And let's invite politicians from outside of the Czech Republic. And let's discuss how was their process of coming out. Did they come out during their office or before? How the electorate take it and how their party took it. And we invited Congressman Cicelin, Member of Parliament Trier, Member of Parliament Karachayan, did I say it right? and Gustav Slamečka, who is actually the only high-level politician or member of the government who was outed. And then we talked to Respect, who took auspices over this debate, that they will have a commentator commenting on the Czech politics. And I'm very happy that Mary Jones, chief editor of Curve magazine, agreed to moderate this debate. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you will enjoy this debate, that we will all find out something about ourselves, about politics, and I wish all of us fruitful debate.
Czeslaw, thank you so much. I'm absolutely thrilled and honoured to be here today. It's a very important moment for me. If you're wondering where my crazy accent comes from, it's Australia, but I am actually based in New York, so which is another story in itself. But thank you for coming. I'm delighted to present this panel with such high-profile and esteemed people. I also want to get a bit personal with them today. I know these are big deal politicians, but I'm going to try and refrain from saying congressman or member of parliament. I'm just going to say David, Mike, Gustav, Mark, and Sylvie, because what's going to happen right now is we're going to share some personal stories, if these gentlemen are willing. Sylvie, you're not gay, are you? What a shame. You are a minority, but thank you.
At least once I'm a minority, so
yeah,
heterosexual. I'm a representative of the heterosexual minority in this panel.
Well, we'll make you work hard. So thank you anyway, but I'd like to start with David, actually. And one of the reasons I'd love to start with your story is because I believe you were the first out mayor in a major city in the United States. And I'd like to ask you if you were always out at the beginning of your political career and what impact that had and how you did it.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me to this panel, and it's great to be with such distinguished colleagues. So I served in the state legislature in Rhode Island for 8 years and represented a part of the city of Providence that was very progressive and very, university was nearby. And so by the time I finished my 4th term, I think everyone knew I was gay. I would talk about it all the time, but it was never sort of official. And so after 8 years, I was considering running for mayor of Providence or for Congress. And I actually wanted to sort of make sure that it was out there very publicly that I was gay, because back then, there was a question, could you win elective office of that magnitude, the mayor's office or Congress, if you were gay? And I thought, well, I'd like to know this ahead of time before I go through all the work of running. So I had a columnist who was doing an interview of me, and at the end of the interview, he said, oh, by the way, are you gay? And I said, yes. So he wrote the column, and then he called me that evening, and he said, the newspaper will not include in the column the fact that you're gay. And the only way they'll include it in the story is if you ask them to, or if it's brought up during the campaign by your opponent. Otherwise, they won't report it. And I wanted it to be in the newspaper because I wanted to sort of make sure everyone knew, you know. So I called the editor myself and I said, you know, what's the problem? And this tells you how far we've come in America. But he said, well, are you asking me to include in the column that you're gay? So I said, I'm not asking you to include anything in the column. I'm not the columnist. I didn't ask you to include that I'm, you know, Italian or that I'm Jewish or... The columnist asked me questions, I answered him. He said, well, the only way that we'll do it is if you ask us to include it or if your opponent brings up in a campaign. So I said, you know, so are you asking us to include it? And so I got into a little bit of an argument, and I finally said to him, sir, you know, the reason you're asking my permission is because you're homophobic. And you think being gay is an embarrassing, shameful, bad thing, and you want special permission from me before you're going to include that in the story. Well, I don't believe that, and I don't want to accept your framework. So we went back and forth, and he still wouldn't do it. So I called back the next day, and I said, look, here was our compromise. I said, I'm asking you to respect the integrity of the reporter. I figured that was a compromise. And so the next day it was reported, and that was the time it was sort of out, like in print. And, you know, it wasn't a surprise to anybody, but it was sort of, and then I ran for mayor after that and was elected 2 terms and then to Congress for 2 terms. So I had to fight hard to have it sort of officially out there that I was gay, which is not everyone's experience.
That's media outreach. You're good at it. It's also something unique to American culture, I think, the feeling that we can have this dialogue openly and that you understand public relations and trying to control your brand and trying to control your image is very interesting. I'm going to jump across to you now, Mark, because you've been in politics for a very long time. You started your career at the age of 21, and yes. I'm imagining that you were out at that time or that your constituents got to know you pretty well and you've grown up with them. You want to tell me how you did it?
Yeah, I think I never came really out of the closet. I was out of the closet all the time. I think I can't even imagine that I was being straight, so I was gay. I think I came out of the closet when I was 17, but it wasn't a big thing. It wasn't a big surprise. I'm from a very small village, but even there it was no surprise. And I never, someone asked me a few months ago, when did you tell your parents? And I was thinking, I think I never told my parents. Maybe I should call them one day. But no, it just was the case. I was gay, and no one was really surprised. And I never officially, my sister never told my parents she was heterosexual. And I never told my parents I was gay. I think they saw with my first boyfriend. They said, oh yeah, that's well. So also in politics, that wasn't really a problem. We had gay members of parliament in Holland since the 70s, 80s. We have ministers even in the 80s. We had ministers who were gay. So it was never really a topic. And also in the political party, I think in our parliamentary group, we now have 3 people who are openly gay. And in the Dutch parliament, in total 8. People, but it's not really a topic. The only question is, will you be involved in let's call it gay politics, in fighting for gay rights and so on as a gay person? I never really considered myself being a gay politician who fights for gay rights. Of course, I'm very pro equal rights and all kind of legislation and so on. And my political party always fought for same-sex marriage. In Holland in 2001, it was the law was adopted. But I never really got on the barricade for gay rights. Now I'm in Parliament. I'm spokesman for European and for Foreign Affairs, and that's for me. That's a podium where I want to come up for gay rights in foreign policy, because in Holland, a lot of things are being, we arrange it very well in Holland. There are still a few part of legislation where we are struggling with, where we have to improve. But in Holland, a lot of things have been very well organized for gay couples, all kind of subtle legislation and so on we need to improve, but in general it's good. But of course, I see within Europe and of course outside Europe, a lot of countries where that's not the case. So in my foreign policy, in my foreign spokesmanship, I will come up for gay rights, and I think that's also for me a good thing to do. I'm credible on that topic, and I can talk about it in all kind of countries. I was in Lithuania 2 weeks ago, and it's one of the most countries in Europe, within the EU, where gays are most oppressed still. So I think that's a task for me to go there and to stand up for gay rights and for equal rights. Not especially for gay marriage or something. These countries struggle with whole different topics. Of course, gay marriage is fantastic on the long run, also for these countries. But the first step is for politicians to acknowledge that there are gays, that the police will stand up for gays in the street and so on, these kind of things.
Absolutely. You mentioned coming out as a Dutch person. It was really a non-issue, a non-topic. And I want to jump over to Sylvie now, because we were having this discussion that that in a liberal country like the Netherlands is a sign of tolerance. But the fact that coming out is a non-topic in the Czech Republic, is it also a sign of tolerance, or is it a sign of something else?
Well, it's a very interesting question, because before this panel and this discussion, I did refresh my memory about all sorts of information about gay and lesbian rights in the Czech Republic. And from the outside, we do look like a rather tolerant country. The Czech Parliament passed a bill legalizing a so-called registered partnership, which is not exactly gay marriage. It's not on the same level as the men and women marriage, but there's a lot of similar rights as the typical classical marriage, so to speak. Many surveys show that the numbers of, let's say, tolerance of a general public towards gay people are rising in the surveys. And also I found it very interesting that this year in May, actually, there was a pan-European survey which was actually conducted among members of the LGBT community. So it was not general public thinking what gay and lesbian people go through, but it's actually themselves talking about their experience. And from this survey, the numbers show that Czech Republic is among those European countries where the life of these people is among the best. They say they don't experience silly jokes, they don't experience violence, nobody attacks them so much on the streets or so much or in other situations. So from this, it looks like the situation for politicians to come out is perfect, yet nobody has done it yet. Gustav Slamečka will talk about his experience, but the truth is that he was a member of a non-political government, and he was not a member of a political party. And I think that's really important. I think what's important in the Czech situation is the atmosphere and environment of the political parties. I was thinking about a proper way how to describe it, and I didn't come up with anything better than old-fashioned masculinity, which is still very common in political parties, is this kind of macho attitude towards all sorts of questions. And I think it's the same reason why, for instance, female politicians struggle in Czech politics, because they are not part of this whole boy club, so to speak. The atmosphere is actually very similar. It reminded me something that openly gay Polish MP said recently, actually in an interview for our magazine. He said the atmosphere in the Polish parliament it's full of guys who like to drink liquor and slap the waitresses on their butts. Sorry about that, but that's what he said. And I think that's the atmosphere. It's the atmosphere of like a football team, in the jokes in the showers, and this sort of idea of being masculine means being homophobic. And I think this is a part of the reason why you're nodding, so maybe you experience something like that. But I think this is the part of the reason why there are gay politicians in Czech politics, but they haven't came out of the closet yet because they're afraid it'll harm their career within the political parties.
Right, so even when you are a boy in the boys' club, Gustav, and you end up on the wrong side of those macho people, would you like to share what happened to you?
Yes, gladly. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm in a little bit special position because, as was said, I am neither politician nor did I come out actually voluntarily. I was a member of the so-called clerk government. My experience, my personal or the professional experience was mostly with private companies. I joined the state services a few years ago. When I said about my coming out, of course that I came out in front of my friends, I came out in front of my family, and I actually never dreamed of coming out because of being in a government or public function. And what was said here about the politicians or about the people that they don't like to come out at work, we may also ask the question how many sportsmen or the really famous other Czech people came out. So I think this is an interesting question. I would probably say there are more reasons rather than the masculine reason, although that might be also valid. As for me, my coming out was not so easy because some of you may remember when I was a minister, I was accused by one of the trade union leaders for organizing some kind of homosexual plot where we can get some advantage based on the position. I was not the only one in the plot, but probably I was the highest ranked. That's why I decided to speak up. And also there was one important reason, because for me, of course, it might have been easier to deny that or just to stay silent, as the others did. But I think that it is important to model some kind of a role model in the Czech Republic, especially for the young people that you know that there may be somebody who is not a politician, who is definitely not doing it for the career. I didn't do it for my career because I was never a politician, I probably will not be. But I decided to speak up because there was an accusation which I considered very dangerous. And the accusation was that, okay, there is this group of people based on their orientation, they are getting some advantages and they are misusing actually their orientation to get those advantages. And this was a very big trigger for me because I said, okay, if I don't speak up, that's going to be very difficult for other people to come out because they will be always accused you do it just because of your career or you want to have some advantage. So I decided that I will talk openly and really that I'll try to make aware the people that there are a lot of professional people who simply because of I don't know how to say, maybe the mood in the society don't want to come out. And actually if they come out, that can be not only for the reason that they have some advantage out of that, but simply because they want to say, okay, we are here, we do our work well, we are respectful persons, we are respectful people, and we want to show that nobody should be afraid of their orientation.
Would you have preferred not to have been outed?
Well, at that point, it was not so easy for me, the situation, because I had to defend not only my orientation, I had to rather defend my personality and my integrity, which is more difficult than to defend your sexual orientation, because here, I mean, although we may speculate about the accessibility of us to other society, but I would say, generally, there is no problem to say that you are gay in front of your friends. But it's a problem that you would say, okay, I'm here, I'm gay, I want to tell it to the others. And I want to also represent some interest of for the society. That's a problem, and that is probably one of the reasons why we have no active politicians who would not only come out, but further even take this agenda.
So, Mike, finally, I'm going to pass the baton to you, and I think it's a really good transition, having come from Gustav's story, because you did something very interesting recently in the high emotion leading up to the passage of marriage equality in the United Kingdom, which was all my friends in Britain were so emotional and hopeful, and yet they were certain it was going to happen. But you gave a speech to Parliament that I believe was somewhat prepared, somewhat not prepared, edited at the last minute, incredibly personal, in which you as a Conservative politician spoke in a language that anybody on either side of the political fence would understand. Would you like to tell us about that speech and how it was a coming out moment for you?
If I could take that backwards, I'm not quite sure it was a coming out moment because I wasn't really ever in that anybody who knew me, my close friends and colleagues, knew that I was gay. And even today, sometimes, if it's any reassurance to any budding politicians, the power of the media is overstated. My coming out speech was on the front page of a national newspaper, the front page of the main London newspaper. I've been on every national and local media, and yet I still get asked if I've got a wife. So I still sometimes wonder that the media doesn't have the power that we sometimes give it credit for. But the reason why I spoke I wrote the speech the day before. Most of us who were gay were not particularly planning to speak because we felt quite strongly. In fact, I turned down lots of media in the run-up to the bill because most of us felt, A, that we just happened to be MPs who were gay rather than the gay MP. And also we felt that those arguing for equal marriage, it was a much stronger argument from our straight colleagues rather than the media being able to say, well, you would say that anyway. And so from that point of view, many of us kind of took a back seat. But then the day before, when we were discussing the tactics of the day, because it was a free vote, so the party mechanisms for getting votes through Parliament weren't in operation, we discovered that we were light on pro-speakers, and we thought that the anti-speeches would basically dominate the debate. And so I wrote the speech and then had to truncate it in half, but very much made the point that, and actually if you look at some of the research about why gay parliamentarians have an impact, it's not that we push gay legislation. In fact, all the correlations that having gay MPs doesn't make any real difference to the amount of gay-friendly legislation. The big difference, and this is where I think the speech made the difference, is it humanises the gay man or the gay woman. When lots of people, particularly older parliamentarians or older people, they always think, I don't know any gay people. Gay people don't live in London. They don't live in the Shires. And actually, when you're standing up and it's someone that you've sat alongside for the last 3 years who didn't know you were gay, why should they? A straight MP doesn't walk in and say, hello, I'm Joe Smith, I'm straight. Why should I walk in and say, hello, I'm Mike Freer, I'm gay? And so from that point of view, it proved that gay men and women, we were just exactly the same as everyone else. We just went home to sleep with a man or a woman of our own sex. And so that was the powerful emotional bit. It was about saying, I'm just like you. And why are you choosing to treat me differently? And I think that's where the speech struck a chord with colleagues and changed some people's votes on the day.
There was actually a moment in that speech where you said, I don't want to be treated differently. And I think Gustav mentioned one of the risks that happens to you when you do come out and you're in public office. People are going to interpret that you've got an agenda, that you are fighting for special interests. And we've seen in the United States how this is often a kind of catch cry of the Conservatives that you're used as wedge politics. You want special interests. But you made so beautifully, Mike, that point. I've been with my partner for 21 years. I don't want to be treated differently. Yes, I have, a civil partnership, but it's not the same. You made that really, really beautiful.
I think the words I used was, I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for equal treatment. And I made the point in the speech that I use the same bars, I use the same, I sit on the same seats as everybody else. And in fact, in the British system, we queue up to vote. And the point I made is, I queue up alongside you in the division lobbies, but when it comes to marriage, why you ask me to join a separate queue? And that made, from my parliamentary colleagues, it was a very stark example of why they were asking me to be treated differently. And that made it very personal. It made it much harder for them to attack, because it's very hard to attack someone who sat right opposite you than this kind of some amorphous gay conspiracy, which is out there apparently. Not that I've ever come across it yet. But you have to humanize the debate.
And while I've got you, there's also another myth, a little bit like the gay conspiracy, but if we think about a gay conspiracy, we always imagine it to be left-wing, liberal. You are a conservative, but you're a bit of a complex one. You have a financial background, and then I find out you volunteered for Meals on Wheels.
Yep.
So how does that work? Because that surprises me even, that I can't put you in a box and say, well, he's just a conservative. There's actually a humanitarian who's openly gay. Is that unique to the United Kingdom, would you say?
I think that the UK, certainly if you listen to Prime Minister Cameron, his view of the UK is that we are fiscally conservative, but we are socially liberal. And if you look at most of my office, most of my team are 22, 23, and they were referring to my partner as my husband long before I was. It's taken me a long time to start calling my partner my husband. I'm still not used to it. And it's very much a generational thing. And I think the UK has shifted dramatically over the last 10 years. And I think that the Prime Minister tapped into that general view that we should simply live and let live. And so I think that's why, and he made a very powerful speech saying he supports equal marriage because he's a conservative, because he believes in marriage, full stop. And it should be open to everybody. And that was his starting point. And actually that was also his ending point. Because many of us have asked questions, why did David Cameron pursue this agenda? Quite often straight politicians have a view on LGBT because they have friends and family. And actually, many of us have asked and said, why is David Cameron doing this? And basically because he believed in equality and he believed in marriage. No other reason, which was quite remarkable.
Yes, we were talking earlier how important it often is to have figures like this, elected officials who actually might not be part of our community but feel a kinship towards us and want to move our rights forward because it's the right thing to do. And I'm going to jump back to David now because this has been happening in the United States for some time. It's changed a lot in the last 10 or so years since you became Mayor of Providence. Would you like to put into a nutshell for the audience some of the developments that you see happening quite quickly, the progress of marriage equality? How many states now? 13. Did you envisage this 10 years ago, that this would happen?
No, I think we've made tremendous progress on the issue of marriage equality in America. There are 13 states now, including the District of Columbia, that provide full marriage equality. My state, Rhode Island, just passed it after many years. And if you asked me 5 or 10 years ago, would people from our community be permitted to marry in states, I'd say probably not. But what's just as exciting is our Supreme Court recently rendered a decision essentially holding that if you're married in a state, then you are entitled to all of the federal benefits, which are very important in terms of pensions and Social Security and tax policy. So I think, we'll continue to see more progress. We have many states that currently have just the opposite, have statutes that prevent recognition of marriages of people of the same gender. So it's not our whole country, but I think to Mike's point, it's really generational. If you look at the polling data in the U.S. for young people, 16 to 24, overwhelmingly, they support full equality for the LGBT community. In fact, the most frequent answer on the poll is, why are you asking this question? They can't even understand that it's a question. Young people are coming out much earlier. They're coming out in schools where there's tremendous support. It's really changing. And I think fundamentally people are starting to recognize that this is kind of a basic whether you call it conservative or liberal, it's sort of a basic, sort of old-fashioned Democrat small d value of treating everyone with respect and dignity and treating everyone equally and not permitting discrimination. Those are, frankly, very conservative values, not having the government intrude into the private lives of individuals. So I think there are a variety of different ways people are approaching it, but I think in general people understand that we will get to that place in America and hopefully in the world where gay and lesbians and bisexual people are treated equally and are free from discrimination of any kind. I don't think there is any question we will get there. The only question is, how long will it take? And what can we do as a community, what can we do as elected officials to accelerate that process and bring full equality to our community as quickly as we can?
So have you been following the situation in New York? I don't know if you know this, but New York's in the middle of a mayoral race. We have possibly the first out lesbian mayor, hopefully, is going to win, who knows. But I think the point I want to make here about Speaker Christine Quinn is that she's been out since 1991. And in all the other discussion that's happening around the mayoral candidates, nobody's talking about her sexuality. It's almost as though it's a non-issue, the fact that she's an out lesbian who married her partner last year, or the year before. People are talking rather about her fiscal policies, or if there's any skeletons in the closet, or what she did about, economics or housing or something else. Nobody's talking about her sexuality. Do you think the days where we are talking about people's homosexuality as a negative are gone?
Well, I think my experience is that we are seeing tremendous progress, and that, my experience is that most people who are making an important voting decision vote in their own self-interest. So when they go into the voting booth, they say, who of all these candidates do I have confidence is going to fight for the things that will improve the life of my family and of me, and that will improve the quality of life of the community that I'm a part of? That's how most people decide. And frankly, the sexual orientation of a candidate doesn't factor into it at all. And I think there's a lot of discussion around the role of sexual orientation in politics, but I think actually people vote for people based on who they think is actually going to do the job well. We have an out lesbian mayor of Houston, Denise Parker. I think mayors are particularly special responsibilities because you can really show the work you're doing really impacts the daily lives of individuals and families. So they have a real concern. Are you going to keep the parks clean? Are you going to improve my kids' school? Are you going to make my neighborhood safe? And I think that's how most people make their voting decisions. So I know we talk a lot about sexual orientation because not enough people in public life come out, and we don't elect enough people from our community. But I think in terms of how people vote, there's very little evidence that people vote for people based on sexual orientation.
Yeah, absolutely. And if your opponents wanted to detract from any work you've done, they wouldn't be coming after your sexuality, would they? They'd be something.
Well, especially once you're out, someone says, "Oh, he's gay." I'm like, "Yeah, no kidding." Okay, now what? Like, what else can you say? He's really gay? There's only, the only interest in that is if you're not out and you're not supporting equality for our community and you're in the closet, then I think it's newsworthy. But after you have sort of embraced who you are, what else can you say about it? And so I think that's when people start saying, okay, well, what are the issues in the campaign? And I think once you say, yeah, I am, and, there's not a lot more to talk about. That's been my experience.
Yeah, we mentioned Mayor Denise Parker in Houston, Texas, and when we think of Texas, we certainly don't think that. I was certainly surprised when she was elected, but people elected who they thought was the best person for the job, and it wasn't that she was a lesbian, it was because she was the best person for the job. There's possibly a little more flexibility in the role of mayor because, as you mentioned, that role works so closely with the community, and if you've done the work to endear yourself and prove yourself to the community and establish a track record, it's possibly a little more forgiving than being a parliamentary, somebody who's elected to the parliament. But we could talk a bit more about that. Sylvia, I wanted to ask you, you're hearing a lot about the United States and the UK and how both of these countries have made enormous strides in the last couple of years. What's happening in Czech culture that there's this silence, that there's a lack of progress? Do you have any thoughts about that?
I would disagree. I don't think there's a lack of progress. I would think there's a lack of progress in the whole coming out among politicians, certainly, but in the society, I was thinking about it when we remember the discussion previously before the bill legalizing the registered partnership was approved in the parliament. Discussion was very wild, and there were several attempts to actually do it, which failed. And the whole discussion, I remember, was very much out there in the media. Today, nobody even thinks about why should we discuss registered partnership. It's a normal thing. So I think that's a great progress in the society. Also, as I mentioned, the surveys, when you look at how the numbers change from the 90s, from the very beginning of the 90s, the numbers changed dramatically. And also Prague Pride, I think that's a great example of the progress. I think this is the third year, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sorry for the organizers. I don't know. It's the third year, okay. And of course, there are a group of conservatives saying something I'm not going to repeat because I don't want to voice their opinions here. But you can see, I actually attended the Prague Pride last year because that year I was in Iceland, visited Iceland, and of course it's a country with very famous equality politics. They had the first open lesbian prime minister, not anymore, but she was in the office then. And I spoke with some people there, and they said the Reykjavik Pride, or these moments, these events, are not a moment for gay and lesbian people to celebrate that they're different. It's actually a moment for the whole society to show we are open society. We're not judgmental towards anybody's lifestyle. We support this, and I like that very much. And I attended Prague Pride with my husband last year, inspired by Iceland. And I have seen, actually, we'll see how it looks this year, but I did see couples with children and people having signs saying, "My son is not." There's nothing wrong with my son. And I did see a lot of heterosexuals attending these meetings. And I think that's a great progress because, of course, Czech Republic also is a society where people traditionally, it's also changing, but traditionally sometimes struggle to show their opinions publicly and really, fight openly and publicly for something. And the fact that more and more people support these events and more people come to it. And really when you see the groups who are somehow criticizing it or against it, they're so tiny. It's like 15 people come there, and on the other hand, you have 10,000 people. So I feel the progress is here, and I also have hopes for the future because so much have changed since the Velvet Revolution in this country, and I think it just needs the first politician to come out from a major political party, and when that happens, hopefully others will follow. I'm not sure if I'm not too optimistic at the moment, but I think it'll happen sooner or later. I really do believe in that.
I don't think you're being too optimistic. The Velvet Revolution was yesterday. I mean, it was so recent in terms of how much time we need as society to catch up. But I think you've just brought up a really good point about the function of pride. It's not, we're talking about coming out here as an individual choice amongst high-profile figures. But what about when we go to Pride, we come out as a collective, we come out as a society. Is there a function that Prague Pride is going to have, especially this year, to let the people of Prague come out as people who care about the LGBT community and actually see them as part of the collective? Because that's what you said when you went with your husband to Pride, you came out.
Yeah,
in a way.
Exactly. And one last thing about Iceland. I don't want to talk about Iceland and Prague, but what's fascinating there is it's a country of 300,000 people, very small. I mean, second largest town in this country is actually bigger. Brno is actually bigger than the whole Iceland. However, out of these 300,000, these events, usually every year 100,000 people attend, 1/3 of the entire country. And I think this is something really amazing. It's like a celebration of the society, celebration of tolerance and openness. And I think if we would ever, of course, in Czech reality, the Prague Pride would have to attract 3 million people, which I don't think will happen, but but it's something to, you know, look up and be inspired by, I think.
Mark, I want to just hop over here because to you in the Netherlands, which is probably widely accepted as one of the most, if not the most, tolerant and diverse countries in Europe, if that's true, why do you still need a Pride? Why is it so huge?
Yeah.
What's its function?
No, that's every year. That's again the question: do we need a Pride? Where is it good for? Haven't we finished the emancipation of gay people? First of all, it's wonderful for an open society to have a Pride, to have a canal Pride. I think in Amsterdam, 600 people are looking at the Pride through the canals. It's really fantastic. It's a big party, but it's also necessary. In Holland, since the 60s, we had really great politicians, open-minded politicians who struggled for, made work of gay rights, of equal rights, day in, day out, and they really diminished the resistance towards that. But the last few years, I think the last 10 years, we see new oppression, we see new opposition against the gay community. I think the open society also in Holland is still under pressure, not from Christian minorities, not from conservatives, but from the Islam, from Muslim young people, young boys, and that's sort of a new problem in Holland. You see in some neighborhoods in the big cities, you see that gay rights aren't that normal. There are people, gay couples are being bullied out of the neighborhoods. So, for example, in Holland, I think 9–10% of the people are of the Islam, believe in Islam, and their gay rights aren't that accepted there. And especially young Muslim boys, especially, for them it's so important to see that we as a society, we accept gay rights, we accept equal rights, gay people are normal, and they have to accept that. If they want to live in Holland, they have to accept that fact, that concept of equal rights. So we still need things like a gay pride, we still need to talk about gay rights, and we've got new opposition against gay rights, not from conservatives, not from other kind of the Christian conservatives and so on, but now it comes from the Muslim society. And we still need to, not only in foreign policy, not only in other countries, but also in Holland, we need to fight for it, day in, day out. So it's, when it comes to some kind of legislation, we have to still improve a lot, but also when it comes to the basic fact of equal rights.
And the LGBT, we throw that phrase around, but we're really only mentioning lesbians and gays. What about bisexuals and transgender people? How are their rights in the Netherlands progressing, and is there more work to be done there to make them included in society?
Yeah, we have kind of an agenda. Also in the Gay Pride in Holland, almost every political party is attending the Gay Pride. So has their own boats on the canals and so, and is attending with not only gay politicians, but a lot of straight politicians on those boats. And we have, prior to the last elections, we had an agenda with, I think, 6–7 political parties. We put a signature under an agenda with 6–7 points, legislative points, we should manage the upcoming years. There are also very technical legislation for transgenders. They are, at the moment, they need to be sterilized when they change gender. Now we need to change that law for gay people to give blood.
That's in the Netherlands and in the Czech Republic. I believe the law is the same. Is that correct?
I think in a lot of
I think in a lot of the EU, before you can have gender reassignment surgery, you have to be sterilized.
Yes.
That's not the case in the US? I don't believe so. No. So I'm surprised at that.
Okay,
and we were talking about this earlier. There's some crazy laws that just hang on. I know in the Czech Republic, Sylvie, you cannot be a blood donor if you identify as gay.
Blood donor that
That's a law that obviously has to go. You cannot adopt children if you're gay and part of a couple. You'd have to adopt those children as a single person. What's it going to take to get these laws rolled back?
Again, on a positive note, there was the discussion started in the parliament actually this year. Several MPs proposed a bill which is, I would say, a first step. It's not adoption in a way that a gay or lesbian couple could adopt a stranger child. I don't know how to say it, sorry, in English. But just as a first step, if one member of the couple has their own children and the other member of the couple has an accident or dies, they can actually, the children can stay in that family and the other member of the couple can look after them. But it's just the beginning. The discussion will take long, and unfortunately we have a political crisis at the moment and early elections coming, so that will be postponed, I'm afraid. But again, it's a first step, and I understand the adoption is highly controversial topic in many countries, and it'll take some time. But again, I believe that the atmosphere is shifting, it's changing, and maybe one day the politicians will see that. For instance, another number: Czech Republic is the country with the highest number of children in sort of institutional care. When they're not in families, they're actually in institutions. And I believe, and I'm not alone with that belief, that a loving gay or lesbian couple is certainly better for a child than to be in a state institution growing up. So this argument is very strong, but the question is if this argument will be acceptable for Czech politicians, of course.
And while I still have you, we've talked about coming out as an individual choice, but when you do belong to a certain political party and your party hasn't evolved its views on what your sexual preference or your gender identity means to them, have you got any thoughts about how that works in the Czech Republic right now? Is it talked about at all? What a party might do if they find one of its candidates is gay?
I don't think it's a topic at all, actually. As I said, we have the registered partnership and also the adoption. It is a topic, but it's not, it's like number 25 after all sorts of topics. So it's not discussed that much, and I don't think it's a part of the agenda of the major political parties.
Coming to the end of our time as the panel, I wanted to ask if anybody had anything to offer, an anecdote, anything that was interesting that we might have dropped, something else to say, while we all sit here, because we're going to throw the next hour open to the audience and have some discussion. But have we covered most of what's interesting to you, or did something cross your mind that you'd like to share right now? Anybody?
Reinforce what was just said a moment ago about Prague Pride. I know a lot of times people think about Pride celebrations as, wonderfully fun events and a lot of music and parade-like events and stuff. And I think sometimes people think about Pride celebrations in that way, and they are often that. But what I think is especially wonderful about Pride here in Prague and about Pride celebrations generally is they are incredible opportunities to really raise the visibility of our community so that people understand that the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender community is a community that is demanding equal rights under the law, and that we are represented in their churches and synagogues and workplaces and schools and families. And the more visible we are as a community, the more quickly we will achieve full equality. And conversations will happen all over the city because of Pride Prague, and because of events that occur like the lighting of the Glorietta, where people are saying, at some kitchen table saying, "Mom, what's that about?" or "Dad, why is that lit?" And hopefully there are lots of conversations and understanding is developing as a result of these public declarations about the importance of this community and of equality. So I just want to salute the leader of Prague Pride for all he's done, and thank you for inviting us.
Thank you. Anybody else have something to comment?
Just one thing about the Czech political system. We talked about the generational issue, that the under 25s, the under 30s are just shrug their shoulders now on gay issues. That has to be the routine on Czech politics. Certainly on, David and I both represent districts. We have a small electorate to stand in front of. The Czech politicians are on a list system. So your party leader could place a gay candidate at the top of that list, and they will get elected, irrespective of what the electorate think. We have a slightly different dynamic where we are elected locally. Yeah, so I wonder whether the youth wings of the Czech political parties aren't actually the pressure points on the leadership. Because if the generational shift has been there, if they apply pressure on their internal party leadership to reflect a different approach, that might accelerate the change in the Czech political system.
Well, the thing is, for the upper house, the Senate, we do have the same electoral system as you have in the UK when you choose a candidate, not a party. And none of the senators have come out yet. Well, I'm not sure if there is a gay senator, but this argument also, yes, the parties have a great influence over their candidates and the party leaders, and that's what I said before. I think that's really important, the whole atmosphere in the party and the whole, it's a very closed environment. And you actually mentioned yourself how you felt sometimes you overheard your colleagues from the party they joked about homosexuals, and they had some, they had these lines which weren't very, very smart or very tolerant. And it's probably very difficult in that environment to actually openly say, yes, I'm gay, when you hear constantly your colleagues mocking or joking, or, in this kind of environment. It must be very difficult. So that's why I partly understand it, why nobody in Czech politics has done it yet.
I think that what we heard from here from colleagues from the US, UK, and the Netherlands is quite encouraging, and I think it also took them some development. The US about 20 years ago was not definitely the US now, and I think that where I would see the stimulus here in the Czech Republic, actually it can come out of some party leader who would take up this agenda and find the people who would represent the agenda. But here, and it was not that long time ago, that the highest representatives of the state, and now definitely not having gay or lesbian agenda, they should actually proclaim that there is equal rights for everybody. The society should be accepting them. They should definitely not suggest anything that would divide the society, and I think it needs to be started from there. Because if this atmosphere of the whole society changes, then I believe definitely the time will also come up for gay politicians. But remember, just a few years ago, or a few months ago, even the highest representative of the states, their proclamation were not definitely gay-friendly. They were going the other way.
The truth is that, if I may just add one thing about the whole atmosphere, our current president actually, Czechs in the audience will know this, but for the foreigners, very nice information. The current Czech president actually refused to appoint this academic, he's a historian, he refused to appoint them a professor because he was actually active. He's gay, and he was openly, and he actually attended Prague Pride last year, and there was the reason why he was refused by the president. He refused to appoint him a professor, which of course caused an outrage, and there were a lot of protests. And at the end, he's called Mr. Putna. Mr. Putna at the end was appointed by the Ministry of Education, so he was appointed a professor, but the head of our state refused to do this. That was quite shocking. So just add this one information about how the atmosphere and the politics actually is in the Czech Republic.
Well, one thing we haven't brought up yet is the spectre of Russia in all of this, and what impact that is having on the rest of Europe, and if that's sending a message to elected officials in the Czech Republic that you can actually pass an anti-homosexual law and get away with it. What do you think the impact
I don't
of that
think
will
this
be?
would happen. I don't believe in this. I think the Russian law at the moment is actually really extreme. I don't think there are discussions, and of course the situation is not ideal, but I think the Russian situation is really extreme, and I don't think that anybody would try to pass a bill like that, like it is in Russia.
It even will help in a few countries to show what a fool Putin is, what kind of a strange and really disgusting laws have been passed there. It could help in other countries to get up the debate about gay laws, about the position of gays. And I think even towards the Olympic Games of Sochi, I think a boycott is a very bad idea for the sporters, but also for the gay community in Russia. It will be politicizing a sports event, but it will get the debate on the agenda. And that's what the Olympics are good for, to get the debate about the anti-gay law from Putin on the agenda, to show him that he's on the wrong side of history, that it's a disgusting law. So I think in that aspect it will help, but we have to find a way, of course, to help the gay community in Russia. But not only Russia, of course. I think in 78 countries in the world, homosexuality is still illegal. And even when you look at Ukraine, at Belarus, and so just countries where we as the EU are doing business with, or dealing with, we should still put the gay topic on top of the agenda.
Right, we only have marriage equality in 16 countries in the world, don't we? I mean, it's not exactly a huge number.
And marriage equality is very important, and it's very important, but in a lot of countries that's so far away, they have to take the first step by not making it, look at Uganda or countries in Africa, by not making it illegal, by politicians who not blaming gays for everything that goes wrong in the country, for police officers who not look the other way when gays are being harassed or something. Just these kind of very basic normal steps in a lot of countries where there's a lot of work to do. And I think for politicians, for gay politicians, and I totally agree, I'm gay and I'm a politician, but I'm not, in Holland, I'm not every day a gay politician who works on gay laws and so on. No, gays just also have houses and need jobs and so on. But when we come in other countries, then we could have a real, we could be a role model as gay politicians in countries like the US, UK and Holland and so on. So I think in that agenda, the foreign policy agenda, I think we have a very important role.
To open this up to the audience now, while our panelists are all hot and firing on all cylinders, is there any burning question from anybody in the room that you'd like to direct at a particular panelist? Yeah, gentleman there on the aisle.
Hello, my name is Sweet and I'm a student of international relations, and as we touch this topic about international perceiving of the countries and stuff like nation branding, the ranks of, for example, soft power and things like that say that the most enjoyable countries are the countries with very good or very comprehensive gay politics, as we see like Canada, Australia, and countries like that. And my question is directed towards Russia. Do you think that these bills can really break Putin's neck, because he's very ideologically empty and he doesn't know what to do in politics, so he's trying to get on this topic which is very, very stupidly perceived in Russia these days. So do you think that it is actually connected, the gay politics, with the good image of the country or not? Thank you.
I think the image of Russia is really under pressure, but not only because of the anti-gay laws, but because of a lot of things. The problem is the anti-gay agenda for many politicians in many countries. That's very attractive because they find a lot of supporters for that. And I think that's one of the reasons Putin had the traditional family values, promoting the family values, blaming some sort of, or the foreigners. Putin also is looking at foreigners to replace them out of Russia. also the gay community and so on. So domestically for him, it's an important agenda, and from a foreign countries, we should continuously say that's not the right way to go, that we oppose these laws, but eventually it has to come from the inside, from Russia, the opposition, and we could help the opposition, the civil society, colleagues, politicians there. We could help them. We could go to gay prides, not only in Prague, but also in these kind of countries, in Kiev, in Georgia, in Montenegro a few weeks ago. We as politicians, but also ambassadors, ambassadors of different countries support gay rights in all kind of countries in the world. And when there's an ambassador attending the gay pride, I think a country, a government will not suppress, will not let riots come to the gay pride because of the attendance of politicians and ambassadors. So I think these kind of signals are very important, that we will be there, that we say that we don't, that we oppose these laws and these kind of things. So I see an important role for us, but eventually, and we have to strengthen the civil society there, because eventually it has to come from the inside of a country. We as foreign policy politicians, we can change the laws in Russia, unfortunately.
I think it's also very dangerous when foreign politicians try to tell other countries what to do. We have to tread carefully. But I think one of the things that will change in Russia is the fact that Russian tourists are now starting to travel more than ever before. And when you see Russian tourists who are in Amsterdam or wherever, and they see gay couples walking down the street hand in hand, they suddenly start to realize that the propaganda that they're getting at home actually isn't true. Now that's a very slow burn, it takes a long time, but as the borders come down, then we start to realize that the gay men and women don't have horns and tails, which is the domestic agenda of Putin. And so, we can do our bit, but I think actually when we see Russian tourists, it's our job to ensure that they see the positive side of the LGBT community, because that will change their perceptions when they go back.
I don't believe that Putin has anything against gay people. I think it's just an opportunistic agenda because of the Russian society is anti-gay, and he just wants to get those feelings, strengthen those feelings, strengthen those agenda. So it's a very opportunistic way of driving politics, I think, unfortunately.
We've got another question.
I would like to come back to the topic of coming out in politics, if I may. Sylvia Lauder claimed here that one of the reasons why some Czech politicians didn't come out is the party system or party itself. We have representatives of some Czech parties here, of Jiří Dinsburg from Social Democratic Party or Tomáš Průša from Green Party. So I would like to hear from them their opinion. How is it? Is it the fact that some of your politicians didn't come out because your parties oppressed them, or is it more individual choice? And I would like to also hear from our guests. How is it in their parties? Do your leaders search for the openly gay politicians to be on the top of the candidate list, or how your parties actually approach this topic?
Well, who's going to take up that fabulous offer? Because it's a good one. We want to hear from a party, so, yeah.
I can't say why some social democratic politician didn't came out, because he didn't came out privately, so I don't know the reasons why it is so. I may only guess, and I think that Sylvia Lauder was right when she said that the internal atmosphere in the parties is a macho atmosphere, and any politician of minority sexual orientation will think very deeply if it might be problem for his political career to came out in this atmosphere in the parties. I must admit that it's not the only problem of equal rights in Czech political system, because there is deep and never-ending discussion, even in Social Democratic Party, which should be more open than, let's say, conservative parties in this case. Then the discussion is about equality for men and women, not to mention sexual minorities. We haven't come to this point until now. But I agree that in general the atmosphere in the country is pretty open towards sexual minorities. It was very difficult when registered partnership was adopted by Czech Parliament. It took much time to persuade members of Parliament to vote for the bill. There were several tries before, unsuccessful, as Sylvia Loder mentioned, and finally we passed it in the Parliament after a really tough discussion. And since it's much better, but still it's not definite. I don't agree that there is no discussion at all about registered partnership. The Czech Parliament passed new civil code something like a year ago, and this new code covers all areas of private statutes, including family law, but registered partnership is not part. It stayed in as individual bill, and in discussion in Czech Parliament, one conservative Catholic member of Constitutional Committee told me when I asked for putting this in the civil code, that it's something, some weird part of our legislation, and he was hoping that it will disappear in a few years again. So it's not like everybody is accepting registered partnership. And we started new, very difficult discussion on child adoption. A year ago, on the occasion of Prague Pride, I mentioned that I support this adoption in the beginning of presidential campaign, and it was coming up, all the campaign, people approaching me saying why I support something, such strange thing like adoption of children by homosexual couples, and now we have very limited proposal for child adoption only for cases where the child is a biological child of one of the couple, and still it is very difficult to find support for this limited type of adoption in the Parliament. I was successful to persuade some of my colleagues, explaining that it's not like bringing children in homosexual couples, that it's the real situation. Only after they were ready to think at all about supporting this bill. So still there is much more difficult discussions in front of us, and it will take a long time to create a really tolerant society in the Czech Republic. The best situation would be if something like coming out, which is discussed today, would be absolutely ordinary and in fact boring statement if nobody is interested, if somebody is homosexual or heterosexual, something like if you state that you prefer hamburger to vegetable or something like that. But it will take really long time before we will get to this situation in the Czech Republic. I understand that there are countries like Russia where the situation is much worse than here, but still there is not sufficient tolerance in the Czech Republic as well.
While I have you, what about the idea of pushing quite aggressively, making it a mandate within your party, saying we don't have any minorities in our party, we don't have any women in our party, we don't have any out gay people, and we need to push? Would that ever happen, or is it just too, is Czech culture too, just wait and see?
I will ask Misha Marksova, who is a shadow minister for human rights and equal opportunities, so she might get her word.
Okay, so of course we try to put this, but on the end, these people who create a majority in the party, those are going to vote about changes in the statutes. So if you, let's say, if we are on the discussion about women, if the party is going to have something like quotas for women on the candidates list, then this is what we wanted, what was proposed, I think, already several times, and they just don't vote for it. That's it.
On the other side, there is no open discrimination of any minority in Social Democratic Party, and I don't think it's worse in any other party in the Czech Republic. But still, the atmosphere is such that it's very difficult for women to be successful in internal party political contest, and maybe it's difficult for homosexuals to come out with their sexual orientation without being afraid of loss of their career.
I think that we all like to think of political parties, wherever they exist, as being unified by a set of values and a set of principles, and they stand for a set of policies that reflect those. And I think sometimes that's the case in the U.S., sometimes that's the case in other places. But my experience is, if you look throughout history, that political parties really only changed in response to what they perceive to be the will of the people, as they have to do this or there's a political cost of not doing it. And I think this gets back to the whole conversation of coming out, is the LGBT community, wherever it is, whether it's in Prague, or it has to be so visible that it's difficult for someone to get elected who is not willing to embrace basic equality for that community. There's a political cost for your refusal to do it. I can only use my own experience in the US. The Democratic Party included in its platform a whole series of things designed to promote equality for the LGBT community, because it saw that community as visible, vocal, voting, and important, and that if they wanted to win elections, they had to not only speak to those issues in the right way, they had to ensure that in the Democratic Party, we had people from that community on the ballot for local office, state office, and national office. And I think one of the weaknesses we're seeing now in the Republican Party is they've made no effort to do that, and they've done just the opposite. It's not included in their platform. In fact, discrimination is part of their platform. And it's very hard to find LGBT members of the community who are in that political party. There are some, but in general there aren't. So I think this, again, is why it's so important for people to come out and for our community to be visible, because it should be the case that a political party that doesn't recognize the equality or the importance of treating all people equally under the law, regardless of sexual orientation, that there should be a political cost to that. And if there's not a political cost, I'd like to think people would do it anyway, But that's not how political parties typically operate, I think.
Any other? Yeah, Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter. I'm an anthropologist from Charles University, and I would like to actually ask you, I will thank you first of all for coming here and to giving a great example for local LGBT, especially the LGBT youth, because coming out in this country is still a very painful process. You can see it on the exhibition, and Piazza does it. Actually, in some cases, it can even end up as a tragedy. And me as a social anthropologist, I know like some cases where it was so difficult and so painful that these people are not with us today to actually witness this beautiful debate. And I have this sort of question, not only about the coming out of LGBT politician as to be really example and really give a message to these young people, it's fine, it's safe to come out, but also as somebody who would come out as an LGBT supporter, as what's now very common in other countries as LGBT ally. Why there are no like agenda for politics here in this country to really openly say, look, I'm straight, but I'm ally, I understand your problems, and please feel safe, I will support you. Because very much in Czech society is this tolerance go hand in hand with the silence. It's basically the sort of a thing, yes, we know there are some gays and lesbians, but we don't want to talk about it because it's not convenient for us. So just don't tell us what you're doing in your bedrooms, we don't want to know about it, and it's just a taboo.
Yeah, I hate that. I don't want to know what you do in your bedrooms. I mean, like we never leave the damn bedroom. I mean, I wish. Sylvie, can I hand that over to you because you're the straight person here, and obviously by coming here today, you are an ally. You actually have acted as one today. Do you want to talk a little bit more about how you see that role?
I think it's just the same answer as the reasons why this doesn't happen, as the answer to the question why there are no more openly gay politicians. There's just something in the atmosphere of the country. I don't really know what it is because, again, as I mentioned, when you look on the surveys, I know that there is, of course, there are problems with surveys because people can say something in a certain situation and they can behave differently in a different situation. Or in reality, that's what I wanted to say. And I don't really know. I have to say, I don't really know why this is not happening. But then on the other hand, just the fact that some people, as you mentioned, the exhibition in front of National Theatre, some people actually let photographers take a picture of their face and they came out with their personal story about their coming out. I think that's also change. You know, I'm still trying to see the situation as not as dark as depressing, but I think that's really important. I can't imagine several years ago, like in the 90s, that you would actually ask somebody, okay, tell us about your coming out, we will take a picture of you. Hello? Yeah, I'm back. We will take a picture of you, and the picture will hang in a huge format in front of the National Theatre in the middle of the national capital. So I think that's also a huge step. But and also another question is about the coming outs, not only about of politicians, but also famous people. It's the same, right, in States or in the UK. Musicians, sports people. I noticed that in States, this famous NBA player recently came out. There was a huge discussion about it. Or that's really important. So maybe also among not only politicians, but also musicians or general artists. And I think it's also happening. When I did research for this panel, I was really surprised that recently this actress came out. I don't really know her, but maybe somebody knows her. She's called Jitka Smutná. She's really famous on one of the endless soap operas on Czech TV. So I think this is really important because it's not alternative dancer / alternative artist. It's actually somebody approaching the general public. And I don't really follow the show, but it's one of these endless soap operas. It's on episode 7,200, and she's a major. She has a role in it, and she recently came out and said, I lived with a woman for 10 years, I'm gay, and they gave interviews together. And I think moments like this are really important, when also people who can approach the general public, who can approach a lady who's sitting in a tiny village somewhere watching this show, seeing this woman, and all of a sudden she can see she is gay. So I think that's really important. So again, I think there's hope. There are some changes. We can see some changes in the society.
Something to add?
Yeah, I second that. The idea of famous people coming out, a lot of famous people being gay, that's so important in a society as a role model. I know in the 60s, 70s in Holland you had a game on television and there was one gay guy. Boys in that time, they only had to say to their parents, I think I'm a bit like him. And then the parents, oh no, but then you had some role model you can refer to, and that's still the case in Holland. And maybe the Czech Republic should attend the Eurovision Song Contest again, because they're all gays there. That's one of the most important gay events. Yeah, or you attend, or you're never in the final. So, but that's one of the most important gay events I think in Europe. So maybe that's important for Czech. Yeah.
No, I'll just try to approach it from a little bit different angle. I'm a finance person, so let us talk about the offer and the demand here. Yeah. For the offer, you have the LGBT offer, you have the human rights offer among the politicians, and I think what was said here, really those two should go together. Of course, that some people might be more courageous to take the LGBT agenda straightforward, but I think that we should really be, and the politicians should be pushing on the human rights agenda because they go together. And now think about the demand side, because of course that you don't have a politicians if you don't have a demand. And I think that what's here, that there is no demand for the politicians to tackle this, is that actually it's a broader issue again. Like if you understand the situation here in the Czech politics and you notice the topics, are they really the topics coming out of the people? Are they really relevant topics? What we read in the press, is it really something sometimes talking about right-wing, left-wing politicians? But is it real which influences your life? If you hear the debate in the Scandinavian countries, there are real issues, there are real lives debated in the politics, and also what we heard here. While in the Czech Republic, I don't think it's only the problem of a limited problem that nobody is that we are not able to proclaim what we want. We are a minority, but a sizable minority. But I think that goes together hand in hand. That people are not often able to name and to quote what they actually want from politicians. We want a good life, we want to travel, we want this, we want more money, and that's it. So I think that's that problem.
Okay. Yeah.
8,000 people will be on the streets on Saturday, or maybe more if it's better than last year, 10,000. They all have votes. When you have the elections for the city council, where do you have the gay press who are saying this is a gay-friendly candidate? It's important that the groups don't become politically aligned, because that can be dangerous in the future. But the gay community should be asking which of these candidates in front of me are friendly to my cause and will deliver, whether it's just street sweeping, but once you get them in a room and start talking about equality issues, they will see the power of your vote. And we can talk from up here as politicians, and we fly in and we're here for 48 hours as role models, but the change starts with you getting your politicians in a room and saying, we're not going to vote for you anymore unless you start delivering on what we want. And so those 8,000 to 10,000 people on Saturday need to start getting into town hall meetings and starting to get their politicians and asking the questions about what they're going to do for equalities. And that's what will change things faster than, with the greatest respect to my colleagues on the panel, us flying in here for 48 hours.
Thank you. Gentleman in the striped shirt is dying to ask a question. Can we get him a microphone? Do we have one? Thanks.
Hello, my name is Zdeněk Sloboda. I'm a sociologist from the Palacký University in Olomouc, and I'm also a member of PROUD, NGO organization that actually submitted the novelization of the Registered Partnership Act to allow these second parent adoptions. I have a lot of things to say, so I'll try to be brief and focused. what just Mr. Slamečka just recently said it's a point that it's very important for the Czech gay lesbian community, and it has also something to do with what you said. I'm sorry, Mr. Colin. Yeah, the problem of the Czech society is that the gays and lesbians have quite comfortable living. They actually gained everything without any effort. They never activated themselves for anything. Therefore, also the Prague Pride is just for 3 years. I would say just for 3 years. We waited some 15 years to have a big gay pride because the activism before was trying to be very invisible, which is very typical for Czech people. We learn to be invisible for you because you are kind of homophobic, though you say you're tolerant. So we learn to live with you, beside you, without you mentioning us at all, and therefore we would not want anything. And also the formal activists said, we want just registered partnership, we don't want anything more. So we struggle also with this also among politicians, that they said, okay, you have a registered partnership, that's everything what you wanted is, and that a registered partnership is the same thing as gay marriage, which is, or as marriage, which is not. And so that's the thing I want to say to what is considering the Czech situation, but I want to ask more or less, we have, and this is also what Mr. Dinsbier kind of said, we don't have registered partnership in this complex civil code, and which is more paradoxical, there was a Minister of Justice who is not outed gay, and I would not mention his name, but everyone knows. And he decided not to have a gay political agenda, to pursue the other agendas, which is letting the civil code to pass with taking out this registered partnership, because it will lower or diminish the possibilities of passing the civil code as itself. So my question would be if, and I think that's also his thought, and also thought of our the most prominent political talk show host, who is also not outed gay, that coming out would make an agenda, or if you come out, it will make for the other ones the possibility to accuse you of having an agenda. But in the other way, you can look at it, if you don't come out, you are always blackmailable. You can be blackmailed for, okay, you will not ask this and this, and I will not say openly that because your grandmother or mother doesn't know, so I will not tell openly in the live show that you're gay. So my question is, if there is an obligation, more or less, for politicians and sportsmen and people that are important for the society that are gay to come out voluntarily, because there are only so few of them, and we have this history of oppression. And in 91, homosexuality was erased from the list of offenses and so on. So if there, and I'm really glad that Mr. Slamečka said that he want to be a role model. So the question is if there is still for role models, because you don't have.
Okay, back. A lot of what you just said then resonates with me as an Australian, funnily enough, because I come from a country where we say, no worries, we have everything that we need, we have a good life, everybody's protected legally, pretty much. And yet we are still lagging behind on gay rights. We still don't have marriage equality, we don't have a bunch of stuff that the US and the UK is already fighting for and winning. And I think the key here is fighting for your beliefs. Doesn't sound like it's acceptable in Czech culture right now at this moment in time to fight, to actually say we need to make more effort, there needs to be a struggle. And it's one of the reasons why in Australia, no one's fighting. Don't need to. Just go to the beach. Just, you know, we're fine. It's all good. Meanwhile, in the US, where there's so many different poles of political thought, religious beliefs, you really will suffer if you don't fight for what you believe in. And that's why you might just see equality happen there much sooner than here. So I guess I've got a question back at you, which is what causes this in Czech culture? It looks like apathy, but is it apathy? Is it conformism? Does it go back to communism? I don't know. Anybody got any thoughts?
I was talking about Czech culture.
The socialist sociologist.
I was asked, so I will answer. Well, there is an apathy in the Czech society. If we consider that our former president Václav Klaus in 2004 said that there will be this reign of NGOism after really 20 years or 10 or 15 years of developing this open society, this public society. He said as a very acknowledged president by the public generally, that the NGOs will force us to do any political decisions. And a few years after that, probably in resonance with a situation in Russia, he accused the first Prague Pride as being this thing of homosexualism, that the homosexuals will bring us some ideology of destroying traditional values. So if someone that is like president of your country said this, it's very problematic to develop any public society. And the people learn during the normalization since the 1968 to be silent. We have this weekends cottage culture that everyone flee from the city, not trying to care about any politics. They just pretend, but they don't. They just like were conformed with it. So I think this is the more or less moral of the Czech people, not to be very active and very visible, because we have quite comfortable life, and if we will be visible, it could be worse. And it is also the thing what also the politicians, gay politicians probably think, or gay and lesbian politicians think, if I will come out, my quality life will be not that quality as it was before. So that's probably my opinion.
I think there's one other thing, and it's not peculiar to the Czech Republic. I think it's one of the challenges in our community is, we're part of a minority that for many, many years in many parts of the world and in many places it still exists, that we have been severely repressed and subjected to imprisonment and beatings and discrimination. And so we're sort of spiritually beaten down. And so when you have places like the Czech Republic that enacted registration, my guess is most people in the LGBT community, if you ask them, they would say, that's great. And they're grateful. I think this is wonderful because they haven't even been allowed to imagine full marriage equality. And I think that's part of our challenge as a community is we have to sort of recognize that we're entitled not to special treatment, special consideration. We have a right to demand equal treatment in all areas of life. And we have to feel that in our heart and in our gut first before we can demand it of politicians to pass laws. And until we as a community, everywhere in the world, stand up and say, you're not giving me something, you're not, affording me some benefit that I should be grateful for. You are recognizing that I'm entitled to equal treatment under the law in every respect. Then we can demand it and throw people out of office who don't do it and fight for people who do. But I think part of it is we have to get to that place first. And very often, because of the history we've endured as a community, we're grateful for the little scraps, from the table, and we have to change that.
It's a great answer, I think, personally. Gentleman down the front row.
Good afternoon. My name is Tomáš. I am the member of the Green Party. I was asked Česlav to tell you my experience. So I must say I am open gay in the party, and I had no problem in my party. I was Secretary General when we were in the government, so I must say now we are not in the parliament, so we are party around 3-4%. But when we were in the parliament, we were in the government, I was the secretary of the general, everybody knew in the party, and they elected me, and no problem. Now I am the member of the board of the party. I got 77% of the votes by the party congress, and no problem. So I think it depends on the atmosphere in the party. It depends on you personally. And if you feel that the atmosphere in the party is quite fine, you are not alone, because I know that I'm not alone in the party, you can do something. If you don't feel it, I think you, in the Czech Republic, you behave like my colleagues in bigger parties, like the former justice minister, as was mentioned, for example. And what I feel as the problem as well, that generally in the Czech Republic, the problem is that the people's rights and the minority rights is not the topic. And it was the topic. I remember it a few years ago. There was a minister for human rights and minorities, and it was the topic in the government. New government came, the minister was, the post was deleted, and now we have only High Commissioner for the human rights. And I think that's also the problem, that we don't have enough people to support this politic in the highest level.
Does anybody have anything to add to that? Interesting point you make. Peter, again.
Thank you. It also sounds like a little bit that politics are representing the demand, but politics should also represent the people who are silenced, not only those who are the most aggressive, demanding. How can you represent a teenager who is just questioning his sexuality and he's completely silent?
I'm probably not going to answer directly your question, and I didn't mean it like that, that the politicians should only represent those who shout or... But coming back to your notion about the government, in the Clare government we had a minister for the human rights. I think this minister was introduced government before. So I would say that the prime minister under whom I served, Mr. Fischer, and also the previous one, Mr. Topolánek, we may question, but in terms of human rights and LGBT rights, they brought up a little bit the agenda. Now, of course, the last government, there was no institutional member in the government, which also might have shown the dedication of the governments and might have showed some signal to the public. And maybe one of the agendas we should have is getting back this agenda on a higher level. Maybe in a way of having a minister or just pushing this agenda up level.
Anybody else? Ah, hello, Czeslaw.
I have one more question, because I think that many gay politicians are afraid that once they come out, they would be treated by the gay community as their representatives, and the gay community would be expecting them to push the gay agenda. I think it was mentioned during the debate. So I wanted to ask your experience. Were you approached by the national gay community to push for the gay agenda? Or was it a natural thing for you to do, or you are not doing it in your parliament at all?
That's a great question. Everybody fears being, or this was a discussion that we had in our country some time ago, though. I don't want to be a poster child for the gay community. I'm more than that. It's reductive. So but that was then. What do you think, Mark?
Absolutely right. I'm not in politics because I'm gay, and I wouldn't be in. I'm glad I'm not in parliament because I'm gay, because that would be something wrong. You have to be in parliament because you're a good politician, or because you have some experience or some ideas, or I don't know what, a lot of votes, but not because you're gay. And I think it's a problem if once you're the only one in politics who's gay, that all the people think he will push the gay agenda. So I think it's, it said before, the straight politicians, they should push the gay agenda also, or maybe at first. I'm not a gay politician, I'm a politician who accidentally is also gay, and I fully support the gay agenda, but I'm not feeling that the gay community in Holland feels that I should carry the agenda forward on my own or something. So I'm not feeling really pressed by the community, but maybe that's different in the United States.
I think it's a little different. Look, I think you get elected to represent your whole district, and you work on the issues that are important to your district, and you bring to your work your life experiences and all of who you are as a person. And so I think in the Congress, I mean, I served as a mayor for 8 years, and obviously as a mayor, there are very few issues which are LGBT issues, and so you work on schools and streets and all that. But I do think that, you know, members of our community who very often help get you elected and who support you also expect that if you're going to go there and there is an ongoing fight for equality for our community, that you will play some leadership role. And I think in our Congress, we have 6 members of the that are openly gay or lesbian, 1 in the Senate, and I would say that we are the principal kind of engine behind legislative efforts to bring equality to our community. It would be kind of weird in American politics if the gay and lesbian members of Congress were not introducing legislation or supporting equality for their own community. It would be very peculiar. Now, that doesn't mean it's the only thing you do. You know, I work on lots of issues in my district. You know, most of my district is straight, so most of my district, that is not their #1 priority, but I do consider one of my responsibilities, and it's not a special, you know, the principle we're fighting for is equality. It's not an LGBT issue. This idea of equal protection of the law is something that straight and gay people should care about equally. We're just often the victims of not getting it in a lot of places. But this is not some special interest, weird thing we're fighting for. This is a very basic, universally accepted value of equal protection of the law, and I think it's important how we frame it. We should expect every politician to be supporting and fighting for equal protection and ending discrimination against all people in our communities. And so I think I do think that we in the American system bring our own life experiences and some expectation that we'll play some leadership role in an important fight for our community. So I think it's a little different.
Yeah, I mean, Czeslaw, what you were saying, it seems that close to justifying staying in the closet, not you personally saying that, but when we start to compartmentalize ourselves and say, well, this part of me is acceptable and I can bring this part of me out into public, but I don't want to bring that other part of me out. This is how we're going to hang back in the closet. And I was thinking about, recently I interviewed Christine Quinn, who is the mayor-elect in New York City, and she is Irish. She has different identities. She's a woman, she's an out lesbian, she's Irish. Well, she had to boycott the St. Patrick's Day parade in New York City, which is one of the biggest public parades, because they wouldn't let her march as an out lesbian. So she had to say, well, I might be Irish, but I'm not going to put myself back in the closet for that one day just so I can march as an Irish woman. And she's never gone back. She's never marched in that parade. And I think that's an interesting choice that this politician has made, to say, you have to accept all of me. I'm not going to just bring certain acceptable parts of myself forward because I'm a publicly elected official. And that's what's happening down there now. Do you guys have anything to add?
In the 2 parts to Czeslaw's question. One, I get a bit more media now as a conservative gay politician, because it's slightly counterintuitive to have a conservative arguing for gay rights, so I get a bit more media for that. Where I've got a very religiously diverse constituency, probably one of the most religiously diverse, and where I found it helpful is that I can now argue for religious equality, which many of my communities are struggling with, from a different perspective. They see I have some credibility as a minority that has had discrimination, that I can now argue for equality for them, and the gay issue is in the background. So from that point of view, it's helpful to be a gay politician, But as we've already said, I don't think any of us have wanted to be pigeonholed as just wanting to talk about gay rights.
You mean you're telling me that you don't have a secret hidden agenda because you're currently advocating for Islamic people in your community?
I'm reporting back to the conspiracy as we leave. But what I found, I have been on the receiving end of an extremist group that because my constituency is very, very diverse, I take the British politicians, we have what are called advice clinics, advice surgeries. I take them out into temples and synagogues and mosques. And one of my surgeries was broken into by an extreme group that had been responsible for radicalization, another MP being stabbed. And interestingly, the actual local Islamic community were horrified. And what it's found is actually it's helped me as a gay man coming under attack because of my sexuality by a fraction of their community, has actually helped me build bridges with the mainstream Islamic community. And what it's done is it's helped break down a lot of these misconceptions that a lot of people who have a fundamental faith, doesn't matter what faith it is, anybody who's got a fundamental faith has a slightly hard-line view. And so once they see you as a person rather than actually your badge, that is very, very powerful. And I think that's the role that we can play as politicians, is breaking down those perceptions and get people to see beyond the badge.
Oh, it's the gentleman in the striped shirt.
I'm sorry, I want to answer the Czeslav's question, and I want to agree with Mr. Colin. Like, you cannot have no agenda. You always have an agenda. Also, to want the world freedom or something is also an agenda. If you are a sportsman, we have few sports people in the parliament that, of course, support some sports event. We had so many ministers of culture that were actors or someone. We had so many ministers of industry that were coming from specific part of the industry, and they were all of course, supporting their people that they know. So you have always an agenda, and wanting from gay and lesbian people not to have gay and lesbian agenda because it's part of their experience. They are just the way they are. So why should you want from them not to have an agenda and accuse them of having agenda because everyone's has? So what's the point of like I answered I know I understand this question, but the answer is just it's so silly to me.
As a community, and I think it really depends kind of where you are, in what country, in what city, kind of as a community. But one of the things that I think we have to do as a community is also develop strong partnerships, to your point, so that we're, when there are fights for civil rights of other communities, or whether there is fight for equal access to education, that people see leadership in the LGBT community in those fights as well, so that we're good citizens and we're good partners and we're promoting good schools and safe neighborhoods and business. And so there are a lot of ways that I think in cities where the community has really grown and been very successful, that they're not just fighting for equality for gays and lesbians, they're fighting for, equal access to a good school. They're fighting with the African American community for the Voting Rights Act. They're fighting with the environmental community to respond to global climate change. So it's also important that people see us as being interested in not only our own equality, but in the strength and health of the communities that we're a part of. So I think that's an extension of it as well.
Yeah.
Well, hello, my name is Jan, and I'm really glad you brought up the idea of other communities and minorities, because I have the question for you guys. What are the steps your governments brought up to invite other minorities and other groups of our society to be involved in and to be accepting the LGBT rights and our liberal society as it used to be, for example, in Netherlands in 80s and 90s, it was mentioned. Thank you.
I want to just throw in something here. We haven't really talked about it, but that's the financial spending power of the LGBT community, which is something that's talked about and has been talked about a lot in the US, how much we're worth as a community. And it's often, we have a very mixed, I'm sure, reaction to that agenda, but when you're starting out, as it looks like you guys are here in the Czech Republic, to look at what is your worth, what is your visibility, what are your chances of getting what you actually need. One of the places we started in the US was to say, we're worth $65 billion, thank you very much, and you need to start talking to us. So I'm going to hand it over to anybody now.
Who came with the number?
I
Or do you
mean,
know how much you're worth?
I just made it up. No,
you made it up.
There are different.
I wanted
figures.
to write it down in the
Absolutely,
article.
there's different figures. There's different marketing firms. There's different ways that these indexes have been created, depending on what demographic and what market we're talking about. Whether it's discretionary income that's spent on travel or that's spent on household goods or whatever. But all the time, it's being monitored. And one of the phrases you might have heard is "pink dollar." How much is the pink
money?
dollar worth? Pink money. Yeah.
Pink money.
Right.
Just have a look at the sponsors of the Gay Pride. I mean, of course, the city of Prague should be interested. It's a big business for Prague. Also, some other associations who make their living or they acquire this pink money, but it's not there. So, Czeslaw, I can't see Czeslaw, but yeah, we discussed that also. And my first question was, it's a big money around. So why people are not interested in that?
To actually answer a question, what the UK government is doing is all government contracts have to respect equality. Our Foreign Office now, when we're engaging with foreign governments, I mean, I had chatted to our ambassador today, and certainly when the first Prague Pride took part, the president was not very happy that many ambassadors wrote letters of support. So our Foreign Office is arguing with countries that are less friendly that they should be changing. Our overseas aid budget is now being very much targeted. So, for instance, in Uganda, the British government will not give aid directly to the Ugandan government. It continues to aid through the NGOs on the ground, because that was a feedback from the LGBT community in Uganda, that if it was withdrawn altogether, they would get the backlash. So certainly the UK government is very much firmly talking to both domestically and internationally, ensuring that the LGBT equality agenda is very firmly talked about with our partners across the globe.
Guys, I am so sorry, but we are like right out of time. Did you have something that you really... Okay, okay.
I'm Eladia. I'm a student from Czech Technical University, and I have two questions for guys and women. First question is, what was your winning topic in election? And second question is, what do you recommend for the young LGBT people, students, if they want to be a politician? Some practice advice.
That's not simple, but we'll try. Who wants to grab that? Mark.
In the elections was, of course, the economy, and the best advice, I would say, I think you shouldn't be a gay politician because that's too small an agenda. You should be a politician, a good politician. You should know what's going on in society. You should have good ideas, and then you should be gay because that's an important part of who you are, but not being a gay politician, but that's a one-trick pony, and I think that's not a good way to start to go into politics.
For me, the main campaign issue was the economy as well, and I guess it will be for everybody. But I think, the most important thing that you can do if you're interested in politics now is become involved in organizations and issues in your community that you care about and that other people care about, so that people see you working for economic development, or working for educational issues, or working for equality for our community, but let people see you doing work about things you care about, so that when you go to ask them for your vote, they'll say, oh, that's the guy I remember who was working with this organization or doing this good work. Get involved now. You don't have to be a candidate. You should be building that resume now, so that when you go to ask for their vote, they'll know you.
also the economy. But my advice also would be go and get a job, because there's nothing worse than a politician who's had no experience of real life.
Amen to that. I would like to thank everybody here for being so wonderful, for being generous with your time and listening to this fantastic discussion. Thank you. Please thank our panelists.
Well, let me thank you on behalf of Prague Pride for this wonderful panel. I would also like to thank our sponsors and donors, without whom we wouldn't be able to make it, especially the embassies of the countries that you see the politicians from. I would like to invite you right now for a glass of wine, where we could continue for 1 hour our discussion in more informal way, so you could actually advise the young gentleman how to become a politician. And also for those who are interested in pink money, on Thursday we have a business forum in Hotel Hilton, where the pink money will be also debated. So you are all invited, but you should register first. So please, let's go down for